Vlad, welcome into the studio, buddy. It has been a long time since we've been able to have a chat, mate, but great to see you. Welcome in.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. And it's been a while since we actually worked together. I think that's the last time we talked in person. But thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is, mate. So we did, you did mention we worked together. So we did, there was this little company that we called Varlo, and it was an amazing company and intranet and that type of thing. So it was really good to work with you there. Look, you as well as Seb, who I just had on the show, full of energy, very passionate people in the Microsoft 365 and SharePoint space. Now, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, mate.
Sure. So I'm a product evangelist at a company called Siskit. They help organizations with their M365 governance. So a lot of it right now is getting organizations ready for Copilot, because a lot of them want to enable the AI features, and then they look at their current environment, they realize they're not ready. So that's a big part of what I do. And I also create a ton of training on a platform called Pluralsight. For those of you that never heard about it before, it's an online on-demand training site. They have about 7,000 courses, not all of them me, of course, but I do have a few out there, including stuff on Copilot for M365, Copilot for Power Platform, and of course, my love, SharePoint administration. So of course, that is covered as well. But yeah, that's me a bit on the professional side. And I also love to travel. Was just doing the MVP contributions because it's that season of the year last year, and did 22 conferences last year. So love to travel.
You did 22?
Yes.
Wow.
So yeah, I traveled quite a bit. I was in Australia just a month ago, Australia and New Zealand, went to Asia. So I love to travel. So if anybody listening sees me in person at one of the conferences you're attending, please drop by, say hi. It would be a pleasure to connect in person. But that's me in a minute and something.
Very good. Now, before we hit the record button, you were showing me something pretty cool, mate. Now, so you did come out to Australia. So show me what you got.
Well, I know it was breakfast time for you, right? It's still Monday for me. It's Tuesday morning for you. So I wanted to join you. So first of all, I have my little pot of Vegemite here. Let's get it into focus with my name on it. Big shout out to Patrick Gibson from One Place Solutions from Australia. That got it for me. As you can see, the jar is not very used right now. As much as I love the jar, Vegemite is still an acquired taste, let's say. So I'm still not really into it, but I did have some in Australia at breakfast. So I did try my best because I know it's healthy. And I also have something that I enjoy a lot more, which is the famous Tim Tams. Now, this, I will eat a lot of them. So just so you know, if you're from Australia and you want to bribe me, Tim Tams work wonders. So that's my little Australian breakfast kit. There.
Very good, mate. Now, so I mean, that little Vegemite jar, as I said, you can probably sit it on your shelf. Give it 10 years, it'll probably still taste the same anyway, mate.
I should put it here near the SharePoint next time we do a video together.
Absolutely.
We'll see for how long it remains full.
Yeah. Now, we are going to jump into Copilot in a little bit, but I want to start with just talking about SharePoint. So you've been in the SharePoint game for a very long time, built many intranets. You've got courses on SharePoint and things like that, and you've done a lot of work in the space. Talk to me a little bit about where you think this is a highly, it's always a topic that causes a lot of debate. The SharePoint Intranet. Tell me about the SharePoint Intranet. Is it still alive?
Well, the funny thing with SharePoint that I find is that it doesn't get a lot of marketing, right? When you look at what Microsoft is talking about, and now they talk a bit about SharePoint Premium, but nobody really talks about SharePoint anymore. And yet, it's at the core of Microsoft 365. Nothing in M365 would function without SharePoint, including Copilot. So even if it's not as popular, you don't see as much marketing stuff around it, it's still there. And as the intranet, it's going to be funny to say, but I don't think Copilot will have a big impact on the SharePoint intranet. If there's something that I learned when we worked together at Valo, is that the goal of the intranet doesn't matter where it is. Our goal is, how do we get communications to people? By default, most organizations that have Microsoft 365 put it in SharePoint because it's built for that. But let's be honest, not everybody loves SharePoint as much as me and you do. At the end of the day, if you have a mobile app, if you have a Teams version of your intranet, if you print out flyers of the latest news and put them in a factory, your goal is to communicate to people. The SharePoint intranet is where the content lives most of the time. And even in the era of AI, it's not like you can store content in Copilot, right? The content needs to live somewhere. The content is in your SharePoint intranet. Copilot simply becomes another channel where people can consume content. It will be along, again, people browsing on the website, Viva connections, email, printing the news and pinning them on the fridge in the factory room. It's just another channel for people to consume content. It will not replace the intranet. So even if I don't work for an intranet company anymore, I still think there's a huge place for the SharePoint intranet. And with Copilot, even more now so that some companies were looking at putting their intranet content outside of Microsoft 365 in Azure or in WordPress or other systems. If they don't have it in SharePoint or they don't have the graph connector set up, they now lose all of that value with Copilot. So even more reasons now to have your intranet on SharePoint. Copilot simply enhances it and offers multiple ways for people to consume that content.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And SharePoint really is the cornerstone or the backbone of all the content services that are powering M365. And focusing on, the communication or the outcome and meeting people where they are. And I think Viva Amplify goes a little bit to that in terms of, being able to pick your channels. So whether it is email, whether it is Teams, whether it is a SharePoint site or a microsite that's on your intranet, and now in turn Copilot, they all become kind of channels. Whereas, SharePoint's like the vehicle, and then you can sort of pick and choose the channel. And
at the end of the day, you just want to get those news to people. You just want to get those documents to people. SharePoint is where it's stored. But if people use it through Copilot or Teams and they hate SharePoint, does it really matter at the end that they don't browse the SharePoint site? As long as they get to the content, that's what matters in the end.
You remember the debate a while ago now where, SharePoint was going to die, wasn't it? It was dead. It was dead in the water. And now it's alive more than ever.
I feel like since 2013, everybody's been telling me that SharePoint was going to die. But I don't know about you, but I'm not having trouble finding clients that need SharePoint consulting.
I know.
So there is a small number of people I find that are very vocal that absolutely hate SharePoint because the SharePoint they know is SharePoint 2007, SharePoint 2010 in an IT environment that was controlled by IT in which they couldn't do anything. They don't necessarily know the modern SharePoint. They don't see how central it is to Microsoft 365. It's like and I'm sure you've had some of them that people want to deploy Teams, but not SharePoint. And we'll just put files in Teams and we're not going to do anything with SharePoint. It's like, sure. We're going to do that. SharePoint is there. SharePoint has changed. And SharePoint, I feel it's more alive than ever. We even have some personal workloads, such as lists with your Microsoft account, which in theory runs on SharePoint. So SharePoint is more important than ever at Microsoft, both on the enterprise side and even on the personal side now. So I love it when people tell me SharePoint is going to die because, again, I think I'll be able. I kind of started my career with SharePoint, which is kind of funny. SharePoint has been the main focus of my career now, and I feel I could work with SharePoint until I retire in 30-something years.
I know. It's an interesting topic. Now, Copilot. You're doing a lot of work with Copilot. Now, Copilot just isn't one thing, is it? There's
No.
lots of different Copilots and instances and things like that. Talk to me a little bit about now. Can you list them all, first of all?
Ooh, that's a good challenge.
I know. Let's talk about the different, I guess, the different aspects of Copilot.
Sure. So let's start with trying to list them all. And even by the time you publish this, it might be out of date. So we'll see, because I feel they release them every other day. But of course, and by the way, this is very confusing. First of all, we have Microsoft Copilot, which used to be called Bing Chat Enterprise. So, you have a product, same name as the suite, which is a bit weird, but that's the one that you can access without any license. Of course, be careful with your enterprise data if you don't have a license, but we can talk more about that later. So that's the first one. We then have Copilot for M365, of course, my main love in a way, because I'm a M365 MVP. So we have that. We have GitHub Copilot for developers. We have Security Copilot that will go live April 1st, and that's not a joke. So that will be out in a week or so. Today, I actually just got access to Copilot in Azure, which is in public preview, by the way. So you can go on the tech community. You can request access on your tenant for Copilot in Azure. So there's that. We have Copilot in Viva. We have Copilot in Dynamic Sales. We have Copilot in Dynamic Service.
Then you've got all the apps, right? So I
kind of put that in Copilot in M365.
Yeah. So Word, of course, and PowerPoint, and Teams, and Outlook, and all of those sort of apps as well.
I think last I heard, if you look at it individually like that, there is about 150 Copilots that Microsoft has created, and we can go in Copilot in Forms, which is the last one to be officially released. Copilot in OneDrive and SharePoint, which are, according to the roadmap, coming out in the next few months as well. So,
that'll be interesting, especially the SharePoint one. I mean, being able to, potentially, I don't know, talk to your Copilot to create a site, and I want a site created with this, and maybe it'll just provision it for us.
I'm really looking forward to that. And, there's always a big difference between Microsoft Marketing Video, which is the only thing I've seen so far about SharePoint Copilot, and what you can actually do, because they often show things that this is what you'll be able to do 12 months from now. We'll see how much of it is ready when it gets released. I mean, we have the Microsoft 365 Community Conference in Orlando coming up in a month. So I really hope we're going to see an announcement then on SharePoint Copilot. And again, the cool thing now, MVP Summit was a few weeks ago, and as MVPs, we cannot talk about anything that we learned about at the MVP Summit. And I didn't learn anything about SharePoint Copilot there, so I can guess things, which is kind of fun. So I really hope we're going to get something new at the M365 conference in Orlando. I would love to be able to get my hands on it there, that's for sure.
Now, with the customers and clients and people that you're working with, where are they getting the most benefit at the moment? Is it the M365, I guess, let's just call it a suite of Copilot. So we're talking, Word and Outlook and Teams and things like that. Is that where you're seeing the most value at the moment? And when people are starting?
Look, it really depends. There is no good way. We're all biased when we answer that question, right? Of course, I work a lot with Microsoft 365. So for me and what I've seen my clients, Copilot in Outlook and Copilot in Teams, only those two are worth it for the whole Copilot license. They offer so much value. But if I'm a developer that sends one email per day and maybe gets 2 emails per day, I don't care about Copilot in Outlook. All I care about is GitHub Copilot, because that's what I do in my day-to-day job. If I work in sales, of course I'm going to love Sales Copilot because it's built for what I do daily. So I don't feel like every person out there, every client out there, the whole company will ever agree on which one is most useful for them, because each Copilot is tailored to a specific role. And customers sometimes often get scared that, oh my God, there's so many Copilots. How am I going to get them all? How is everybody going to learn them all? You don't need to learn them all. Your users will not need to learn them all. Most of them might use one or two Copilots, but nobody other than the IT team needs to understand all of them. And the IT team, if you're signed up to be in IT, you signed up to keep learning, and there's new stuff every day, so get used to it. But for most users, M365 Copilot, that's probably going to be universal for most people. And then GitHub Copilot or Service Copilot or Sales Copilot, depending on your role in the organization. And the one you love the most is the one you use the most, because like, what do you spend most of your day on? I'm sure if you talk to Seb, for example, well, I was going to say he used to be technical, so maybe a couple years ago, and I hope he listens to this because I always make fun of him. I love you, Seb. That when he spends time coding, GitHub Copilot, of course, if he spent all his 40 hours a week coding, GitHub Copilot will be his best friend. But now that he's a principal program manager, he does a lot of emails, so I'm sure he's slowly switching over to Outlook Copilot. He's his too favorite good. One.
He's too important to be coding anymore, mate. He did mention.
I know, right?
I know. He did mention GitHub Copilot and how much time that's how much time that's saving. Now, you did mention there, and you hit on some really important topics there, I reckon, and it gave some really good answers and insights into, the amount of different Copilots, but not to get overwhelmed. And it's really important, I find, and you probably find this as well with the people and the clients that you work with, that it's really important before Copilot gets rolled out that you understand the roles, you understand how each specific role is going to use Copilot and how it's going to benefit them. Because as you mentioned, a developer isn't going to get much value out of Copilot in Word or, something like that. Whereas, an executive team or a CEO is going to get more value out of Copilot in Microsoft Teams for meeting recaps and,
the meeting like recap. That's my favorite feature, to be honest. Meeting recap, that's I love that one. That's my favorite one. But I think that, and this is something I'm actually working on a YouTube video now, which is 5 mistakes I made in my first month using Copilot every day, right? And the first one, and I guess you'll get to know it first here on this podcast, is unrealistic expectations. The thing is, Microsoft marketing until very recently, everything you saw about Copilot was, here's how I saved 30 hours of work in the past month. And you would see these huge numbers of hours saved on productivity gained and everything. And as I started using them, I was like, I thought I was failing at using it properly, because 30 hours a month is a lot of time saved. It's a huge time. But just last week, Microsoft released a study, now that more companies are using it, everybody can buy Copilot, on what are the realistic numbers. And it's really funny. People find it a success if they save 11 minutes per day. So that is the goal that you should be looking at, where you truly increase your productivity with AI. So being able to save 11 minutes per day. And how long? I'm not sure. Did you see that study or not yet?
No, I haven't yet, no.
Okay, how long do you think it took people to get to that 11 minutes per day on average? Like how many weeks?
2.
11. So
11
on average, it took people 11 weeks to get used with Gen AI, with M365 Copilot, to how do I talk with it? What are the different workloads where I'm more efficient doing it myself versus more efficient asking Copilot to do it for me? So this is why in my first month using Copilot, and Before I used it at clients, but I didn't have that data of using it, every day with all my own data. And my first month, I thought I was failing. And a lot of customers had the same problem because they were like, hey, I just bought M365 Copilot for 100 users, hoping they would save 30 hours per month because that's what Microsoft tells me I should save. So why don't I see the productivity like a hockey stick increase like that? Now we're actually getting the more realistic numbers. And I think that it will be a lot better now that we have those more realistic numbers on what to expect and be able to have a more successful rollout because now we know what success really means. And there was a lot of stress, especially on the people that were approving the budgets, because people were fighting for the budgets. Hey, we got to get Copilot, and then the leadership up top was like, hey, you promised me big numbers. I approved your budget. Where are they? So I think that before you roll out Copilot, you need to have a success plan. You need to plan out what is each role, how are they going to use it, and let's maybe work out on a plan for them. Let's have the training. Here's a prompt every day for the next 30 days that you should try on how to be more effective, because not everybody's used to working with Copilot. Not everybody's used to working with Gen AI in general, not only Copilot, because ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, they all understand the same way of talking, right? It's just that M365 Copilot has access to your data, which makes it a ton more amazing. But still, not everybody knows how to talk to AI and how to get the best results out of it.
Well,
so
it's a bit of a mind, a mind shift as well, and making it more of a habit in your day-to-day work on actually thinking, stopping and thinking about how can I actually use my assistant now to do some of this work for me and offload that. And again, you mentioned something important there is learning how to talk to your assistant and talk to your Copilot and get the most out of that, so that what gets returned is obviously of value. Obviously, we need to check things when things come back. I mean, we're not relying 100%, yes. But the more that you practice, the more that it becomes habitual, and again, a good, I guess, a good best practice or a good piece of advice there is to have that training plan and implementation per role. Now, you can break out that into sort of prompts per role, one per day, as you mentioned there, which is a good piece of advice there as well, just to get people, keep it front and center for people as well. What about
sorry, go ahead.
What about in terms of getting? So that's more around the user enablement side of things. What about? Let's go back to SharePoint. What are some things that organizations need to start to think about to prepare their data? I guess there's a few. I guess there's a few key areas that organizations need to think about to.
Sure. So first of all is securing your data, right? Because, and I don't mean securing it like hackers are going to get in and things like that, but for too much time, organizations were really tough on external sharing, but really lax on internal sharing. So we've seen a lot of those. Yeah, we'll just share that with everyone except external users. We'll just make the default sharing link everybody in my organization, and your whole organization ends up being really secure from the outside, but your insider risk is huge. And they practice security by obscurity, right? Where somebody doesn't know they have access to this, they're never going to find it. But now with Copilot, it amplifies your current settings. So it takes everything that a user has access to and makes it 10 times easier for that user to discover it, because they can ask something completely unrelated, but if you talked about it on a site that the user doesn't only have access, that answer might get returned into Copilot. So first thing you should do is secure your environment internally. And again, we focused too much on all the external sharing and external oversharing in the past. It's now time to look at internal stuff as well. And I've seen, Daniel, you started putting some videos based on the SharePoint best practices. So everybody make sure you go check them. But Microsoft actually shared 5 steps on how to get your SharePoint environment ready for Copilot. And most of those steps have to do with oversharing, which is the biggest blocker, in my opinion, to Copilot in enterprises. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Copilot works best if you have all of your data in the graph. So you might have, and it's okay, as much as I'm a Microsoft fanboy, it's okay that you have some stuff in ServiceNow. It's okay that you have some stuff in other enterprise systems. You can create connectors that allow you to bring that data in the Microsoft graph. This way, Copilot can leverage them. If you're a company that's all in Microsoft 365, amazing, nothing to do. But I would say that 90% of the organizations, they might still have file shares. They might use a different help desk system, a different wiki system. Create the connectors to bring the data in. So that is the second one. The third thing is start working on an artificial intelligence policy for your organization. We've seen so many things online about ChatGPT, right? Everybody, every news outlet loves to talk about ChatGPT. So that's the most popular one. And a lot of consumers are thinking, yeah, I know ChatGPT, I probably shouldn't put my company data in there. But then they go to Microsoft Copilot, log in with their Hotmail account, and then they're like, oh, I can put enterprise data in there. It says Microsoft at the top, so I'm good. It's not that they want to hurt your company, but a lot of people don't know what does enterprise data protection mean using Gen AI tools. What kind of data can you put in there? So again, Copilot might not be the only Gen AI tool you use as an organization. You might be using other AI tools. Start working on a company policy and training people on the basics of AI before you even roll out Microsoft 365 Copilot. And especially if you have M365 E3 or E5, start training them on Microsoft Copilot, previously Bing Chat Enterprise, just to avoid the confusion. You can start training them on that today because the skills they learn about prompting in Copilot for Web are 100% the same skills they need for prompting, which, by the way, prompting is talking to a Copilot or to any Gen AI tool in Copilot for M365. The earlier they understand how to talk to the AI, that sounds really funny to say, but how to interact with a Gen AI tool, the more productive they'll be on day one with M365 Copilot.
So the old Bing Chat, what's the difference with data protection versus not? How does somebody differentiate between the two?
Sure. So from an admin perspective, let me start. You need to have an M365 E3, E5, or F3 license. Microsoft said they're going to bring it to every Entra ID account in the future, but that's not the case yet. From a user perspective, when you log in, and now just close your eyes, Daniel, imagine you go to copilot.microsoft.com, and you will have little shields. You'll have a shield at the top right and a shield right above your prompt that says, in green, your enterprise data is protected in this chat. If you see that shield, you can put your company data in there. So you can maybe copy paste the document and ask it for spell checks, for things like that. That data will not be used to train the model. If you do not see that little shield, it means that the data you put in there can be used to train the model. Now, what does training the model means? Imagine that I'm writing a book on PowerShell. And I'm really good at explaining PowerShell. I'm really good at what I do, but I'm bad at spelling. So I go into Copilot, I put my book in there, maybe one page at a time, and I ask Copilot to spell check it, to rephrase it. the GPT model, the AI model behind might decide, hey, you know what? I love the way that Vlad is explaining PowerShell in this thing. This is the best way I've seen so far. And the next time that Daniel goes on Copilot to ask about PowerShell, it might use the data that I gave it to answer Daniel. So my IP has now been used to train the model. So that's why you should not put enterprise data in any Gen AI tool that is not backed by commercial data protection or enterprise data protection. And even ChatGPT has their own ChatGPT Enterprise version that companies can pay for that bring that enterprise data protection. But again, not many people know about it because they haven't received the training about it.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I've seen that with my clients as well, where they're just not aware of and the data protection stuff with those shields that you're talking about. They're doing that in they're in Copilot, but they're in with their personal account or something, personal Microsoft account or something like that, and not their enterprise account. So that's that's really important, especially from a user enablement side of things, that people are aware of that and companies are aware of that, and the training is in place so that people do know about that. I think that's that's really important, and that policy, the AI policy that you're talking about, again, something that is obviously something that would evolve over time. I mean, it's not something that's set in stone, but you need to have something in place to start with.
AI is evolving so fast. That has to be, and I feel like we've been saying the same thing forever. Your M365 governance is a living document.
Yeah.
Your AI policy is a living document as well, because AI changes so much. I mean, a year ago today, we didn't even have M365 Copilot, and ChatGPT only became popular 18 months ago. So it's crazy how fast it's advancing, and it's going to keep advancing. So your policy should keep up to date.
So what are you using the most for you personally? What you spoke about the meeting recaps earlier. Are there any other Copilots that you're using frequently?
I think Copilot in Word is the one that is like my third most used one, because I find it does an amazing job at. So the way that I work often is I create presentations. I have everything in PowerPoint, but then maybe I want to create a blog post about that presentation.
Yeah.
Copilot for me does an amazing job on converting, for example, from Word to PowerPoint or PowerPoint to Word and things like that. So I would say Copilot in Word is my third most favorite. I would like it to be Copilot in PowerPoint because I feel like I spend so much time in PowerPoint. And Daniel, I'm not sure if you know about this, but not every PowerPoint template is Copilot compatible. So you need to have certain layouts in your PowerPoint template for Copilot to work with it. Funny enough, the PowerPoint template for Pluralsight, which I'm working a lot with now to create courses, is not Copilot compatible at all. At all. Like, it does a really, really ugly result. And that's something that I did not know. And talking about expectations and things like that, I was really disappointed until I understood why. So that might be on your company to-do list. Make sure your company PowerPoint template is Copilot ready. This way people can create beautiful presentations.
So where are things going? Where do you think, we're at, obviously still in the infancy of Copilot there, but already there's so much value in it that, people can start taking advantage of. Where do you think things are going, and what, I guess, where would you like to see things go?
Well, I think I actually have the same answer for both. Maybe I'm wishful thinking, but I want Microsoft to actually release, and I don't want to use the word stabilize, but fully release everything they announced so far. So, for example, in Copilot for Outlook, I cannot reference files, even if that's in the video. I don't have Copilot in Excel on my Android phone, even if that's something that's been announced. 6 months ago. So what I hope for and what I think will happen, again, maybe wishful thinking, is that Microsoft will just release all the hundreds of announcements they did over the past 6 months. I want to see a V1 of the SharePoint Copilot. I want to see V1 of the OneDrive Copilot. I want to have Copilot on all the apps on my mobile phone, because I hate it now that I got used to, for example, Copilot in Word to summarize long things. I go on my phone and I don't have it. So I want to have all the things that were announced so far. In Outlook, for example, Sound Like Me, which was an option that got announced at Ignite last year, is not yet there. So there's quite a few of those features that I just want to see them. So for me, if you ask me what my perfect scenario would be, I hope that in the next 6 months, Microsoft just publishes everything they promised so far. They get it ready where I can have very good experience across all of the apps. And I'm sure by then they're going to have a ton of new things to announce. But I just hope that for all the stuff that's kind of just released today, we get to a point where everything that we see in videos, you can do in real life, and it's available on all devices.
Hey, actually, while you were talking, I've got a question for you. Do you, when you're prompting, how much importance, like if you're in Word, how much importance do you place on authenticity? So allowing, do you feed in, examples of the way that you write or the way that you talk or the way that you present when you're generating content? And if you do, does it make a difference?
Depending on what I want to do, if it's something more for emails, for example, or if I want to do something more personal, I try to give it 1 or 2 examples. But if it's something that, for example, if I write a blog post for a more marketing version, I would rather not. So I kind of let it go, give me the first version, but then I go in and manually change things myself. So I maybe should do it more often, actually, than I'm doing it now. But I don't do it every time. But I do find that it makes a difference because Copilot looks at that example, finds a pattern. So it does make a difference, but maybe I don't do it often enough. I should do it more often. And again, even for us that we work with Copilot a lot, it can still take time for things to become a reflex when you talk to Copilot. Even if you know you should do it, you have to get used to specifically asking it to do it. It won't remember it next time necessarily.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I mean, I'm finding, again, in certain scenarios. So again, it's just understanding what the result is that you want with it, whether you do want it in your sort of tone of voice and that type of thing. Now, mate, you are a very extremely passionate person. The way that you present and the way that you talk is really infectious. And along with your good mate Seb, you're both, very, very passionate about the space. Now, as we wrap things up, mate, where can people, and I highly, highly, highly recommend everybody watching and listening that you follow along with what Vlad is putting out. The content is simply amazing and you learn a lot. Obviously, what we've just spoken about there's some great insights, some great, some great things that Vlad has shared. So where can people connect with you, follow you, and just keep up to date with everything that you're doing?
Sure. So I'm on almost every major social media platform. You'll find me on Twitter. I have a Facebook page, on LinkedIn, even on Instagram. Don't hesitate to add me, connect with me. It will be my pleasure to connect with as many of you as possible. And I'm also working on a bunch of YouTube content. So Vlad Talks Tech on YouTube or on Pluralsight, where you'll find more of my long form structured learning. Again, I have 8 hours on Copilot so far, more being released very soon. So if you kind of want to go through more of the structured learning, see tons of examples, you'll find all of that on Pluralsight.
I will put all of those links in the show notes as well. Mate, it's been a very insightful chat. I will expect a follow-up to this, but I do need that Vegemite jar on the shelf behind you. There it is, there with your name. I highly doubt it's going to be open the next time we chat. It'll just be sitting there.
There we go.
It is an acquired taste. I could talk to you forever, mate, but we'll leave it there. I'll let you go. We will have a follow-up 100%. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel, and looking forward to next time.